You could easily make the argument that Steven Spielberg is the greatest director of all time, and even if you don't agree with that opinion, it's really hard to argue against it simply due to his body of work, what he has done for the movie industry, and how he is still kicking at this late stage in his career when some of his contemporary peers at this stage of their life are not producing the type of films that he is. So after seeing Disclosure Day and filling in the gaps of his filmography, I'm honestly surprised that there are so many movies on this list that either are unseen or people don't even know exist. But here is my subjective ranking of every Steven Spielberg film, and I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Even Spielberg himself has been critical in 1941 over the years, and it's easy to understand why. One of his few attempts at broad comedy, the film never quite finds its rhythm and simply isn't funny at all. The cast is impressive, and it's undeniably cool to see talents like Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi show up in a Spielberg film, but the comedy often feels louder than it does clever. What's interesting in retrospect is how the movie reveals Spielberg's fascination with World War II. While the comedy doesn't work for me, you can see early traces of ideas and imagery that would later reappear in far stronger films. If there's a weak spot in Spielberg's filmography, this is probably it. Remove this movie and he might have the most impressive 4-film stretch in movie history, from Jaws through E.T.
I catch dreams.
The BFG is a rare misfire from Spielberg's more family-friendly films. Despite the source material and Spielberg's talent for capturing childhood wonder, the movie never quite finds the magic it's aiming for. The giant himself quickly becomes more annoying than charming, making it difficult to fully invest in the relationship at the center of the story. The visual effects are technically impressive, but often feel artificial rather than enchanting. Most damaging is the fact that the narrative simply isn't very engaging. For a film built around imagination, it spends surprisingly little time inspiring it. It's one of the few Spielberg movies that feels genuinely forgettable.
Take a seat. Okay.
Always is one of the stranger entries in Spielberg's filmography because it often feels like a really good movie struggling to find the right tone. There are moments of genuine emotion and charm, but they don't always fit together as seemingly as they should. Holly Hunter brings warmth and sincerity that helps ground the story even when the film itself feels uncertain about what it wants to be. The biggest point of interest today may be its place in film history, as it features Audrey Hepburn's final screen performance. That alone gives the movie a certain significance. While it never fully comes together for me, it's easy to see why some viewers have developed a fondness for it over the years.
So what are you, a triple agent?
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is one of those legacy sequels that feels more interested in reminding audiences of the past rather than creating something memorable in the present. The idea of passing the torch to Shia LaBeouf is certainly interesting in hindsight, especially considering how quickly that plan disappeared. While the film has moments that capture the spirit of the classic Indiana Jones, they're buried beneath a messy story and questionable creative choices. Spielberg's direction remains competent, but it often feels like everyone involved is operating on autopilot. The result is a sequel that never justifies its own existence, and it's not completely without entertainment value, but it's difficult not to view it as a missed opportunity.
Greenpeace, what drew you there?
Women.
The Lost World often gets lost in the shadow of the original Jurassic Park, and honestly, that's understandable. While there are some entertaining sequences and a few memorable dinosaur encounters, the film lacks the sense of discovery and wonder that made the first movie so special. It often feels more focused on delivering bigger action scenes than building the same emotional connection to its characters. That said, it's far from the worst Jurassic Park sequel, and there are moments where Spielberg's skill as a director still shine through. Vince Vaughn looks like he's having a great time, and the movie remains watchable throughout. It may be one of Spielberg's more forgettable films, but even a forgettable Spielberg movie usually has something worthwhile to offer.
He gave us a place to go. A place called the Oasis.
Ready Player One feels like a legendary filmmaker trying really hard to speak the language of a younger generation. The result is a movie that is visually energetic but emotionally hollow. The screenplay lends heavily on nostalgia and intellectual property references, creating a world that sometimes feels more like a collection of recognizable brands than a fully realized story. Spielberg's action direction remains strong, and there are moments where the concept genuinely works. Ultimately, the film's larger message about technology feels surprisingly shallow given the subject matter. It's entertaining enough in the moment, but it doesn't leave much behind once it's over.
I thought perhaps you might need these for the barbed wire.
Warhorse is a film that perfectly captures the strengths and the weaknesses of Spielberg's sentimental side. On one hand, it's undeniably emotional and visually beautiful, with several scenes that showcase his ability to create powerful human drama. On the other hand, the story can feel earnest and occasionally struggles to maintain momentum. It's easy to understand why Spielberg wanted to tell the story, especially given his long-standing interest in war and humanity's capacity for compassion. The movie wears its heart on its sleeve, sometimes to its benefit and sometimes to its detriment. While it doesn't fully work for me, I can absolutely appreciate the ambition behind it.
Chao Chi,
Temple of Doom always felt like the odd entry in the original Indiana Jones trilogy. It trades much of the adventure and charm of Raiders for a darker, louder, and stranger experience. There are certainly memorable sequences and some genuinely impressive action set pieces, but the film often feels more interested in spectacle than storytelling. It also has somewhat awkward distinction of functioning as a prequel, which doesn't fully add much to the overall series. That's not to say it's bad. There's still enough Spielberg craftsmanship to make it entertaining, but compared to what came before and after, it feels like a step down. It's a fun ride, just not one of the franchise's strongest adventures.
God. The medicine is for God.
The Terminal is built around a genuinely interesting premise, and for a while that's enough to keep things engaging. Tom Hanks once again proves he can make almost any character likable, even when stuck living in an airport. The problem is that the movie occasionally feels trapped by its own concept. What starts as a charming setup sometimes becomes repetitive, causing the story to lose momentum. There are moments of warmth and humor scattered throughout, but they don't always add up to a compelling whole. Spielberg's optimism shines through, and there's certainly something admirable about this film's sincerity. Still, compared to many of his other projects, this one never fully takes off.
I can smell it on you.
The Adventures of Tintin ended up being one of the bigger surprises to me in Spielberg's filmography. The animation style takes some time to get used to, and it can initially feel distracting, but once the movie finds its rhythm, it becomes clear why Spielberg was drawn to the project. The motion capture technology allows for action sequences that would be nearly impossible in live action, resulting in some incredibly creative set pieces. More importantly, the spirit of adventure feels genuine throughout. The film captures much of the same energy that made Indiana Jones so appealing, while still carving out its own identity. It's a fun, inventive movie that deserves more attention than it usually receives.
Hush, you old fool, always meddling in somebody's business.
The Color Purple felt like a major turning point for Spielberg. Up to this point, he was largely known for blockbusters, adventure films, and family entertainment, making this kind of serious dramatic material a bold creative swing. Thankfully, it paid off. The film tackles a difficult subject matter with sincerity and emotional weight while showcasing Spielberg's growing confidence as a dramatic filmmaker. Looking back, it's one of the earliest signs that he was capable of much more than spectacle and entertainment. While some of the later dramas would refine those strengths even further, The Color Purple deserves credit for opening that door. It's an important film both within his career and within the evolution of how audiences viewed him as a director. Some people don't count Duel as Spielberg's first feature film because it originally premiered on television, but since it later received a theatrical release, I absolutely count it. The premise couldn't be much more simple. A man is terrorized by a mysterious truck driving on a lonely highway, but Spielberg turns that simplicity into a masterclass in suspense. The film constantly keeps you on the edge, finding creative ways to escalate tension with almost no resources. Even this early on in his career, you can see the foundations of what would make him one of cinema's greatest directors: impeccable pacing, visual storytelling, and an instinctive understanding of how to build a scene. It's impressive how much personality Spielberg injects into a story that is essentially a prolonged chase. If nothing else, Duel serves as proof that his talent was obvious from the very beginning. Empire of the Sun might not be one of Spielberg's most talked about films, but it is a fascinating one. The biggest takeaway is the incredible performance from a young Christian Bale, who carries a surprisingly demanding role with remarkable confidence. The story itself can feel a little uneven at times, and it's not always the most gripping narrative Spielberg has tackled, yet somehow he finds a way to make every scene visually engaging and emotionally involving. His gift for creating scale and wonder remains present even within the backdrop of war and hardship. It's an ambitious film that doesn't always receive the recognition it deserves, and it serves as another important step toward the more mature dramas that would define the next stage of his career.
What court wants to be responsible for the spark that ignites the firestorm?
Amistad is a perfectly well-crafted film that showcases Spielberg's strength as a dramatic director. The performances are strong, the subject matter is important, and the production is as polished as you'd expect. Yet, I've always felt like there was a certain distance between Spielberg and the material. Unlike some of his other historical dramas, this one never quite feels as personal or emotionally urgent. That's not enough to make it a bad film, but it does keep it from reaching the heights of his best work. One of the more interesting aspects today is seeing an early Matthew McConaughey performance before he became the star audiences know now. It's a respectable and worthwhile film, even if it doesn't leave the same lasting impression as some of other Spielberg's dramas.
And this is no longer my father's company.
The Post feels like Spielberg returning to one of his favorite subjects: the importance of storytelling and the responsibility that come with it. By focusing on the journalists fighting to publish the truth, the film becomes a celebration of free press and the role it plays in a functioning democracy. The performances are strong, and Spielberg keeps the story story moving despite its dialogue-heavy nature. That said, it never quite reaches the same heights of his very best historical dramas. It feels more like a solid, well-crafted piece of filmmaking than a truly essential one. Still, there's value in watching a filmmaker this experienced tackle material he clearly cares about.
And could you bring me some pans also and some other junk?
The Sugarland Express usually isn't mentioned among Spielberg's essential films, but it's a solid early effort that deserves more attention. One of the highlights is an underrated score from John Williams, making the beginning of one of the greatest director-composer partnerships in movie history. The story itself isn't particularly riveting, but what makes the film interesting is seeing Spielberg's style continue to take shape. His ability to guide an audience through a story, create momentum, and find humanity in his characters is already evident. You can feel him becoming more confident behind the camera with every sequence. It's not one of his great films, but it offers an interesting glimpse as a filmmaker who is clearly on the verge of something much bigger.
Henry Jones Jr.
Like Indiana.
After the darker and more divisive Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade feels like a return to everything that made Indiana Jones so enjoyable in the first place. The film recaptures the sense of adventure and fun that defined Raiders while adding a surprisingly effective father-son dynamic. Sean Connery is fantastic alongside Harrison Ford, and their chemistry elevates the entire movie. It's also fun getting a glimpse of a young Indiana Jones through River Phoenix's performance in the opening sequence. The action is exciting, the humor lands, and the film never loses sight of what audiences loved about the character. While Raiders remains the benchmark, Last Crusade is a worthy companion piece and one of the more entertaining films Spielberg has ever made.
Are you okay?
War of the Worlds stands as one of the most effective post-9/11 films without being directly about the event itself. Spielberg takes a familiar science fiction story and filters it through a modern sense of fear, uncertainty, and helplessness. The result is a surprisingly intense and often terrifying blockbuster. Tom Cruise gives another strong performance, but what really stands out is the atmosphere Spielberg creates. The alien invasion feels immediate and personal rather than grand and heroic. There are several sequences that rank among the most suspenseful of his career. By focusing on survival instead of spectacle, Spielberg transforms a classic story into something that feels unsettlingly contemporary.
Do you or do you not hold that the precept that all men are created equal is meant literally?
Lincoln could have easily become a standard historic biopic, but Spielberg finds a way to make even the smallest conversation feel dramatic and important. Much of the success comes from Daniel Day-Lewis, who delivers one of the greatest performances ever captured on film. Rather than focusing on the broad strokes of Lincoln's life, the movie narrows its attention to a specific political moment and explores the compromises required to achieve meaningful change. It's a film filled with speeches, meetings, and legislative maneuvering, yet somehow it's constantly engaging. That's a testament to both Spielberg's direction and Tony Kushner's screenplay. Together, they transform history into compelling drama.
Did we accomplish anything at all? Every man we kill has been replaced by worse.
Munich may be one of the heaviest films Spielberg has ever made. It's a tense political thriller on the surface, but underneath, it's a meditation of violence, revenge, and the consequences of both. The subject matter is intentionally uncomfortable, and Spielberg refuses to offer easy answers. That can make the film difficult to sit through at times, but that's also what makes it so effective. Every action carries weight, and every victory feels complicated. What really elevates the film is its ending, which reframes everything that came before it and leaves the audience with questions rather than conclusions. It's one of Spielberg's most mature and challenging works.
Trust me?
It is very easy to see how influential Stanley Kubrick was with AI. The movie is filled with fascinating ideas concerning consciousness, humanity, love, and technology, and it often feels more like a philosophical thought experiment than a traditional blockbuster. Spielberg brings warmth and emotion to the material that could have easily felt cold or detached. At the same time, the film can be incredibly strange, especially as it ventures into increasingly ambitious territory. Some viewers find that off-putting, while others see it as part of the appeal. Regardless of where you land, it's hard to deny how unique the movie feels. There really isn't another Spielberg film quite like it.
Oh, I think you'll beat me someday.
You're gonna beat everybody.
I think you'll beat everyone someday.
Minority Report is simply one of Spielberg's most entertaining sci-fi films. Because it starts with such a great premise, the idea of preventing crimes before they happen opens the door to all kinds of ethical and philosophical questions, but the movie never forgets to be fun. Tom Cruise delivers one of his strongest performances, balancing action hero charisma with genuine vulnerability. Spielberg also creates a futuristic world that feels believable without becoming overwhelming. The technology is imaginative, but it always serves the story rather than distracting from it. While the movie occasionally gets a little goofy, that's part of its charm. It's a smart science fiction wrapped inside an incredibly engaging thriller.
Hand me my book, please.
I fully admit that nostalgia might be doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, But I absolutely love Hook. It's one of those movies that critics were never especially kind to, yet generations of audiences have embraced it. The cast is stacked from top to bottom, and Spielberg transforms Neverland into a playground that feels endlessly imaginative. Robin Williams brings heart to Peter's journey, while Dustin Hoffman clearly relishes every second as Captain Hook. The Lost Boys remain one of the film's biggest strengths, and honestly, I refuse to believe they didn't influence at least some of future skateboard culture. Hook may not be perfect, but it captures a sense of childhood adventure that's difficult to resist. Disclosure Day is such a fascinating entry into Spielberg's filmography, and it's difficult to separate the film itself outside of the context of everything that came before it. On its own, the movie is ambitious, thoughtful, and often compelling, even if it doesn't completely succeed in every area it explores. Some viewers will likely be frustrated that it doesn't fully commit to being a traditional alien science fiction film, while others feel like it may fall short of delivering the profound statement it's reaching for. But what I appreciate most is the conversation it's trying to have. Watching it through the lens of Spielberg's entire filmography reveals connections to themes he's been wrestling with for decades: wonder, belief, family, communication, and humanity's relationship with the unknown. Whether it improves or declines with time remains to be seen, but it's certainly a film that gives you plenty to think about after it's over.
Father used to say, "Watch this man."
Bridge of Spies is one of Spielberg's most underrated films. The premise sounds simple on paper, but the execution turns into a gripping political thriller built almost entirely on character and dialogue. Tom Hanks is excellent as a man whose greatest strength is simply doing his job with integrity, even when everyone around him questions it. Spielberg avoids flashy filmmaking and instead focuses on tension, patience, and moral conviction. The result is a movie that feels surprisingly relevant despite its Cold War setting. It's not one of his most ambitious works, but it's a reminder that Spielberg doesn't need spectacle to keep an audience invested. Sometimes great storytelling is enough.
I was a coach of the baseball team in the springtime.
The opening 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan is some of the most impressive filmmaking ever put to screen. Spielberg's depiction of the Normandy invasion completely changed how war is portrayed on cinema, creating a level of realism and intensity that filmmakers are still chasing today. Once the film moves beyond Omaha Beach, it settles into a more traditional mission story that doesn't always maintain the same momentum. Fortunately, the ensemble cast is strong enough to keep the emotional stakes grounded throughout. What separates the film from many war movies is it focuses on the sacrifice and the duty. Even when it occasionally veers towards sentimentality, the craftsmanship is impossible to deny. It's one of Spielberg's most influential achievements and a defining film of the genre. I am so glad that Steven Spielberg got to direct a musical, because the result feels like something he has been preparing for his entire career. West Side Story is visually stunning, filled with vibrant cinematography and camera movements that make every musical number feel alive. Rather than simply recreating the original, Spielberg finds a way to make the material feel fresh while preserving what made it endure in the first place. Rachel Zegler immediately announces herself as a star, bringing warmth and authenticity to Maria. More than anything, the film serves as a reminder that musicals can create a kind of cinematic magic that other genres cannot match. It's one of the strongest late career films Spielberg has ever made, and proof that he still has new creative challenges to conquer.
When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit.
The Fabelmans feel less like an addition to Spielberg's filmography and more so as a key to unlock it. By exploring his childhood, family life, and early fascination with filmmaking, the movie recontextualizes so many of the themes that have appeared throughout his career. Broken families, absent fathers, childhood wonders, and the power of storytelling all come into focus here. What makes the film so effective is how personal it feels. Spielberg isn't simply celebrating movies, he's examining how art can help us process emotions that are otherwise difficult to understand. For film lovers, it's incredibly easy to connect with. More importantly, it's a touching reminder of why Spielberg became a storyteller in the first place.
Do you always work on Christmas Eve, Carl?
I volunteered.
Catch Me If You Can is one of the most effortlessly enjoyable films that Spielberg has ever made. Leonardo DiCaprio is fantastic, bringing both charm and sadness to this character, constantly reinventing himself. Beneath the entertaining cat and mouse story is something surprisingly emotional. A young man desperately searching for stability and a father figure after his family falls apart. That's where the relationship between DiCaprio and Tom Hanks becomes so effective. Spielberg keeps the movie moving at a brisk pace, making it feel almost impossible to be bored. It's funny, stylish, heartfelt, and endlessly rewatchable. Few directors can make a movie this entertaining while still giving genuine emotional weight.
This is gold.
It's difficult to talk about Schindler's List simply as a movie because it feels closer to a historical document or a piece of living memory. Few films have portrayed the horrors of the Holocaust with this level of power and emotional impact. Spielberg's direction is restrained when it needs to be and devastating when it matters most. It's not a film I revisit often because it's not meant to be an easy watch, but every time I catch even a few scenes, I'm completely captivated. The imagery stays with you long after the credits roll. What makes this accomplishment even more remarkable is that Spielberg released this and Jurassic Park in the same year. It's one of the greatest 1-2 punches any filmmaker has ever delivered. Raiders of the Lost Ark feels like Spielberg taking everything he learned about suspense and adventure filmmaking and channeling it into pure entertainment. While it leans more into family adventure than some of his earlier work, it never sacrifices tension or excitement. Indiana Jones instantly becomes one of cinema's most iconic characters. Helped by Harrison Ford's effortless charisma and a John Williams theme that practically defines adventure itself, the opening sequence alone remains one of the greatest introductions to a character ever put to film. Every set piece somehow tops the one before it, creating a movie that never loses momentum. Decades later, Raiders still feels like the gold standard for action-adventure filmmaking. Close Encounters of the Third Kind marked Spielberg's first introduction into sci-fi filmmaking, and it's still one of the strongest films of the entire genre. What stands out most is how deliberate every shot feels. There's a sense that every image matters and every moment is building towards something larger. Unlike many alien movies that focus on invasion or destruction, this one is fascinated by wonder, obsession, and uncertainty. Spielberg captures what it might actually feel like if humanity encounters something completely beyond its understanding. The film is as much about how people react to the unknown as it is about the unknown itself. It's awe-inspiring, unsettling, and visually stunning in a way that still feels unique decades later.
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Jaws is one of those rare movies where every single element of it has become iconic. The score is among one of the greatest ever written, and that's true not just of the famous two-note theme, but John Williams' work throughout the entire film. Spielberg's direction is just as impressive, with nearly every scene carefully composed to maximize tension. The decision to keep the shark hidden for most of the movie turns the unknown into a real villain, making every trip into the water feel terrifying. What makes the film endure, though, is that it isn't just about the shark. The characters are so memorable that the movie becomes just as engaging once it shifts into an adventure at sea. In the process, Spielberg didn't just make a classic film, he helped invent the modern summer blockbuster. E.T. is one of the clearest examples of Spielberg's ability to tap into childlike wonder while still dealing with surprisingly mature themes. Beneath the science fiction premise is a story about growing up, losing your innocence, and trying to find your place in a world that suddenly feels more complicated than it once did. The film's depiction of a broken family gives the story an emotional foundation that makes the friendship between Elliot and E.T. feel genuine. Spielberg understands that the best fantasy stories aren't really about fantasy at all. They're about human connection, and of course the image of bikes soaring across the moon remains one of the most magical moments in movie history. Few films capture the feeling of being a kid quite as perfectly as this one.
Hold on to your butts.
Jurassic Park is personally my favorite Spielberg film of all time because it perfectly combines two things he does better than anyone else: wonder and terror. The first half is built around awe, inviting audiences to marvel at dinosaurs brought to life through groundbreaking visual effects that still hold up remarkably well today. The movie pivots into a survival thriller, turning those same creatures into sources of genuine fear. That balance is what makes the film so special. Spielberg wants you to appreciate the beauty of these animals before reminding you why bringing them back was a terrible idea. It also dips into themes of capitalism, which I find really relevant, especially today. All these large corporations are so much more concerned with their profit rather than their actual consumers. And honestly, the fact that every single sequel to follow has struggled to recapture the magic somehow makes this one even better. It's blockbuster filmmaking that actually has a profound message, and you just don't get movies like this today. So that is my personal ranking of Steven Spielberg's filmography. I would love to hear where you disagree. So please comment below what your favorite film is.